Ahoy! It's your buddy Hambone here, and I'm back again with a brand new coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This month, the code is Arcana, and it's a long one. It's running from now all the way through September 14th, and it's good for 10% off orders of $10 or more, online or in person. Arcana is the code. And let's face it, everybody, it's summertime. It's fun time. It's time to get back together with your friends and family, maybe do some grilling and chilling and ripping some board games or tabletop RPGs. And for all your tabletop RPGs, board games, dice, and Magic the Gathering needs, look no further than Noble Knight Games. Noble Knight also has a killer trading program, so if you need to free up a little space on your shelf and add a little cash to your wallet so you can buy more games, Noble Knight is where it's at. And there's more details on that on their website. In the meantime, the code is Arcana, good from now all the way through September 14th from our friends over at Noble Knight Games.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire. With me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He often wonders if it's this hot under the sea because it's hot as hell in New Jersey. Stu Horvath.
It's true. I ducked my head out the back door at like 8:30 this morning, and it was already a raging inferno.
It's wild because I went to take the garbage out before, and I just opened the door. I didn't even poke my head out, and through the screen door, I could just feel the heat permeating, and I was like,
it's like a wall of awful.
It's a risk-reward scenario. It's like, how bad does the garbage smell versus like how sweaty am I going to get walking to the garbage can? I walked to the garbage can. The garbage, it stank, but like, there was a moment. Anyway, we're going to talk about what today, Stu?
We're talking about The Bestiary, which is one of the 3 volumes that make up the Atlantis role-playing game from Bard Games.
Fantastic.
So Bard Games, I'm a big fan of Bard Games. They were part of the explosion of 80s role-playing games. They started out making some stuff for D&D without actually saying that they were making stuff for D&D. It was the Complete Alchemist, was a new character class. The Complete Adventurer added a whole bunch of character classes, and the Complete Spellcaster was sort of like an alternate magic system. They put all those out in the early 80s, like 83. And then they decided, well, let's make a game, which basically is D&D like. It's called, the overall thing is referred to as Atlantis. The first volume is the Arcanum, which is the rules and spells.
Oh, such a good name too.
Yeah. It's actually also one of the very few non-D&D RPG books to sort of get targeted by the Satanic Panic folks, because it had a big old pentagram on the cover.
I mean, that'll do it.
It's funny though, because like that got caught up in it, but then like Steve Jackson's GURPS fantasy supplement also has like a demon coming out of a big old pentagram, and that didn't get caught. So it's funny how that works sometimes.
Yeah, but around that time, like Motley Crue had pentagrams on everything. So like the pentagram was like the like flag for like you might be into some cool shit. Unless like you're a parent, then you might be into some dark shit. Like child has been coupled and co-opted by the devil himself.
It's the same thing.
I've heard it both ways. It's fine, but go on.
So the Arcanum comes out. The second book is the Lexicon, which really describes the world. And then you have the Bestiary, which is the monsters. I mean, the best one.
It's always the best book. Let's be real.
Yeah. 1986, the Bestiary comes out. It is the best book. I like the Atlantis books generally, but the Bestiary is a little special because of who did the art.
Who did the art?
Bill Sienkiewicz.
What?
Yeah, the entire book.
Shut up. That is awesome.
It is by far, by a large margin, the coolest monster book aesthetically that ever came out for a role-playing game.
I mean, I was going to say, like, you see Bill's art like all over like stuff like the New Mutants, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like a calling card for that particular comic, I thought, for the very beginning of it, at least. And like, you look at it and it really does stylistically lend itself to fantasy. So now like my mind is blown and I'm like, how is this not a bigger thing?
Right. And I mean, it is sort of like a known thing now. Like this is easily the most expensive of the 3 when you're looking on eBay, but it's really fascinating because this was 1986. He put this out right in the middle of his Daredevil and Elektra material with Frank Miller.
Oh, it's crazy.
So the guy's just exploding in comics, and he finds time to do this monster book for a role-playing game. it's mind-blowing.
Which again, it goes back to how is this not bigger? Because if you are a fan of the work, generally it's something I've learned throughout the years is that like people may be a fan of like one aspect of your work, but not a fan of all aspects of your work. But art is art, man. Art across the board, whether it's in a comic book, whether it's in a tabletop RPG, it looks the same as every other piece of art that they do in like the best possible ways. Like, how wasn't it bigger?
So, I mean, part of it is just that it was too soon. It was too early. I think that right at that particular moment in time, you could see, at least in retrospect, you could see the coming collision between comics and role-playing games, but I don't think it's really happened yet. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles role-playing game was just coming out around now, and that sort of sets it up, but it's really Palladium that I think with the Rifts books starting in 1990 that really starts putting role-playing books in comic book stores and, you know, recognizing that there is a crossover audience there. So I think that the Bestiary was just, and by then, you know, Bard Games had sort of moved on from Atlantis and was doing Talaslanta, which is an anagram of Atlantis, but it's a different role-playing game. I remember seeing Talaslanta books in my comic book stores, but I never saw that. I think it just was a little bit, it flew under the radar, which is a shame because it's a fantastic book. The conceit behind Atlantis is literally that it takes place in the real world, and it's all of kind of the populated by our folklore as if it was all real and coexisting at the same time. So the monster book is sort of like wonderfully generic for the most part. Like you have a lot of stuff that is in Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games because it is mostly drawn from folklore. You could take all of this art and basically just like have like a D&D monster book illustrated by Bill Sienkiewicz. It's crazy.
Home run any way you look at it.
Everything is just gorgeous looking, especially his demons. I think he had, it always comes back to the demons.
Oh, he's got to draw really good demons.
Yeah, there's tons of them. Everything is good. It's dark. It's all sketchy. It really, he was one of the first guys who really married the kind of the European comic sentiment to the established American comics sensibilities. And I think that's one of the reasons why it works so well for role-playing games. It comes out of like that, a larger tradition than just comic book artwork. I love, you know, comic art, but I do think that it's like a little bit different from role-playing games, because role-playing games sort of comes out of the illustration tradition, which comes out of like, you know, England and France in the 1800s. And you can see that here. Oh, you know, it's also weird because the D&D toys were all comic book guys designed them. That was like Steve Bissett and Tim Truman and John Tonelben designed all that. But that was like in 83, 84. There's always been like these weird, they're parallel industries. So like there was always going to be crossover. But yeah, it just hadn't happened quite yet in 86. So this is just a little hidden treasure for you to dig up on eBay, folks.
Wow. Maybe we should post about it in the patron lounge first. Give him at least a head start, you know, like.
This one is definitely a stew effect. I know what the prices are, and I'm keen to see them go up. I mean, I'm not keen to see them go up. It is definitely a worthwhile book. I think that the substance of the book is interesting too. I generally enjoy the approach Bard Games takes to fantasy. So there's a lot of interesting twists and turns with the material. But it's just cool to see like Bill doing, you know, monsters and minotaurs and like it's just it's outside of what I expect from him. I expect like a gritty kind of urban thing from him generally, probably because my first exposure was Daredevil and New Mutants,
right?
Batman to a little bit, but even like his later work, like he did the one season of the Venture Brothers DVD insert that was very much like in that Johnny Quest adventure vibe, you know, and like I think of him as a modern day artist. I don't really think of him as like a fantasist.
Right.
So it's interesting to see him kind of put his chops to that. Everything is so like loose and emotive and like sketchy, and like, you know how he like leaves spaces out and makes like negative space work. Like it's all here. It's just applied to like a dwarf instead of like a superhero. It's so good.
Yeah, I've always loved the negative space aspect of his work, especially the way he always had like this tendency of drawing the characters in their most like intense or imperiled moments, where there was always a vibe of danger. There was always a vibe of like, hey, this might not go our way. Like, you're looking at the cover and you're like thinking to yourself, shit, like this person is truly in a bad spot, which I think is in a lot of ways missing from a lot of comic art in general, and also a lot of, RPG art in general, because, for a game where you are going through, in most cases, a dungeon to fight dragons, a lot of these characters still look like a little fluffy and soft and like it's cool. We just came from the tavern. We ate a full meal today. We had a good night's sleep. And now we're going to go wrestle this monster in this basement of some guy who's a wizard. And it's the opposite with Sienkiewicz's art, because there is always this moment when you look at the cover and you could feel the anxiety. You could feel like the tension just pouring off the page. And it's something that I don't think that we really got ever again, and I can't speak for it in RPGs because I literally just found out now that he did the art in RPGs. But, it's something that, growing up reading Marvel comics, it's something you didn't see again after the covers of the New Mutants. He would do covers here and there, but like after that, everything got a little more like fluffy and like pouches. And like, I miss that style of art. I miss that energy and the vibe. And I think like now that I know it's a part of an RPG, I'm like shocked more people haven't tried to get him to do work for them, because holy crap, that is like powerful.
Yeah, it's weird how he makes such a big impact, and it's undeniable. Like his stuff is so good and so like emotionally raw, but nobody else kind of really works like that. Like I can't like Dave Mack kind of a little bit. Jock kind of has a little bit of that in his proportions and his compositions, but not so much. No one is as unrestrained in it. Dave Mack kind of has like a very designery sense, so it's ornamented in ways that I think distinguish it. Nobody just goes wild with it the way Bill does. I think that's true of most role-playing game art. Mayfair had an artist whose name escapes me, who did a lot of work on their version of Chill that I feel evokes Sienkiewicz's art. And I think that in the 90s role-playing space, you were more inclined to see it in games that were more like urban, like the World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade kind of games, or like anything horror, which there was a ton of in the 90s. I feel like maybe there, like you might say that an Earl Geyer kind of has a glimmer of this, but nobody really compares. It makes the book just so special, I think. And like that emotionalism is great, because like he's got one page, and it's my favorite page of the whole book, and it's kind of one of the more conservative ones, because it's just like, I don't know, 8 or 9 demons, and they're named demons from like the Gosha or whatever, like Astaroth, but it's just squares of their heads.
Ooh, yes.
Accompanied by his like he labels them, so it's like Moloch and his like weird scratchy lettering. And like I just find it so powerful, because he's just showing you the face and the words, but like you get so much raw emotion out of it anyway. Like you still get a sense of these entities without having to see the entire body. He's just a really powerful artist. It's really cool.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love RPGs so much. And like, when people meet me out and about at conventions or anywhere, they're like, oh my God, they like ask me questions, and I just try to really gently break it to them that I know nothing. Like I am learning along with you. So dear listener, if you've been listening for a long time, because we are in our 4th year, you know the score, about your old buddy HB. But if you're a new listener, just know I know nothing. This is what's great about our show, is that Stu will show up to record and be like, we're going to talk about this today. And then throughout the course of the episode, my mind is literally blown right now. Like I'm literally like, now I'm like, all right, now I need to go on eBay. Now, granted, this is going to come out like, I guess, a couple weeks after we do this. So I will already have my copy at the nice price, because I got the inside track with the Stu effect right here. But I don't know, man. I think this is really cool. Like, I think that this, for a person who loves comics and for a person who loves like RPG, this is a nice little like nook where the two meet. And I'm like literally Googling it as you were telling me about this. Like, I'm dying to get it in my hands and check it out.
It's so good. It's just so good. That's all I can really say about it.
So, Stu, I normally ask you what your final thoughts are on a project, but I think for this one, it would be more apropos to ask you, do you have a favorite monster in this bestiary?
Of course I do.
Is it a demon?
Of course it is.
Yes.
It's Asmodeus.
Oh my God. That is so good.
He's totally a very, I would say sort of classical take, Roman-esque, where he's just sort of like buff dude on a fiery throne. But he's got this really cool crown that sort of looks like horns, but also flames at the same time. And he's got a cool sword. He just like, he conveys this whole vibe of a king of hell in not a lot of ink. And it's really kind of fantastic. But honestly, it's hard to pick a favorite because there's literally so many awesome illustrations in here.
Well, you know what they say, Stu? Asmodeus without a cool sword, it's like a day without sunshine.
In hell. There you go.
So this was another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG podcast. Stu, where can the people find you online?
They could find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, where, as luck would have it, I have a post this week on the Bestiary. Who'd thunk? It's like I have a calendar or something.
Like you plan stuff in
Except
advance.
I didn't. This was just luck.
Serendipitous. You can find me across social media at John McGuire RPG. I'm posting more because this is the home stretch for my Zine Quest 4 project, The Devil in New Jersey, a found footage horror RPG by 321 Action. If you haven't already, boogie on down to Kickstarter. Show us some love. You are going to absolutely love this story. The Devil in New Jersey by 321 Action. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got early release episodes. We got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's book, which is titled Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground, a guide to tabletop role-playing games from D&D to Mothership. We've also got a look behind the scenes at everything that I'm doing with 321 Action. We're running games for our patrons. We got a good DCC game going currently, and I'm going to be running Chill in October, a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of, and so much more. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. And if you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.